So last time we were talking about confidence intervals for the mean of two different normals. So remember what we did. We took two different samples. We took two different samples, one each from the first and from the second, and we call it x bar and y bar, and we want to estimate mu1 minus mu2, and we can't in general take if we don't know the variances, we can't just use this as an estimator. But suppose that the variances are equal but still unknown, then we can use this pooled estimator, which is combining the variances from both samples, and we get this interval using the t distribution with parameter n plus m minus 2. So let me do an example of that. So this is exactly example 7.4b from the text. So let me just read it out. So there are two techniques for making batteries, and for each of them they selected a certain sample and measured how large the capacities are in this ampere hour units. So they got these numbers for the first technique from 12 samples, and these numbers for the second technique, these 14 numbers for the second technique. And now we have to determine a 90% two-sided confidence interval for the difference in the means. So so I've done this on Mathematica. Okay, so let me show you. So these are the numbers for the first sample, and these are the numbers for the second sample. And what we have to do is we have to construct this. This will be our confidence interval. So Mathematica has commands for the mean and the variance. So for the mean of the A sample, I'm calling the technique 1A and technique 2B. So for the A sample, the mean turns out to be exactly 143, and for technique 2, it's this fraction, and so the difference, which is x bar minus y bar, which is common to both, is 101 by 40. Okay. So we can see roughly how much that is. It's about 7.2. And so now I want to construct this fellow, which I will add and subtract. Remember, the t distribution is symmetric for the origin. So I construct this pooled estimator. So remember, so let's look at this formula. So n for me for the first sample is 12 and m is 14. So I'm going to construct and I need the variances s1 squared and s2 squared. Those I have calculated here, 556 by 11 and 8713 by 92, and I'm going to plug it into here. So I get 12 minus 1 times the first variance plus 14 minus 1 times the second variance divided by n plus m minus 2, and that's the square, that's the pooled variance. I need the pooled standard deviation, so I'm going to take the square root of that. So that's this quantity, and it turns out to be very close to 7. And from the formula, I also need square root of 1 by n plus 1 by m. So that's what this quantity is, and I multiply the two, and I get 2.75. Now I want to get this number out. The value at which this t distribution with n plus m minus 2, which is 24 parameters, 24 degrees of freedom, sorry, is greater than alpha by 2, which is in our case for this problem we want 90%, so alpha is 0.1 and so alpha by 2 is 0.05. So this is in Mathematica, this is done by this something called the inverse survival function. So I'm computing the inverse survival function for the t distribution with 24 degrees of freedom at 0.05. And just to confirm that the inverse survival function does what it does, so I take the standard normal and at 0.025, which we have memorized to be 1.96, and that's it. So we take this value and I get 1.71. And so my values will be the mean minus this value, which is 1.71, times this product, which is 2.75. So I take the mean, remember, which was 101 by 14. I multiply this inverse survival function by this guy, and I get 2.498, and I add it, and I get 11.9. So, and let's check. So from the program that this book provides, which I don't have and I don't care to have, I get this interval, which matches very well with what I got. Okay. I would say that this is a better number than that because this is much older program, and so likely to be less accurate. Okay. So this checks out, and what this suggests is that mu1 is in the 95% with 90% confidence interval, mu1 seems to be better than it because this is positive. This entire interval is positive. Okay. Any questions about this? Okay. So I have been uploading. I've been converting this Mathematica file into a PDF, and I have been uploading with the in the class notes. So please look at it. All right. So we have so far seen confidence intervals for standard normals and in various forms, means, variances under various assumptions, and differences of normals. But now we want to do something a little different, which is also of great practical importance, and I'll show you an example. So this is the following. So we want to look at confidence intervals. So this is the last kind of confidence intervals we will see for the mean of Bernoulli randomness. Okay, so let me describe the setting. So we have a large population of which each is a quote-unquote success with probability p. N are sampled. So remember we discussed this earlier. So we take a large population. If it is capital N, then we get something which is close to a hypergeometric distribution. But we assume that population size is very, very large. So you know, in that case, this is the number of successes, which is x, is a binomial n, is approximately a binomial NP distribution. So unfortunately, this tilde symbol is also used for approximately, and I have been using it throughout this course to say is distributed according to. So I will write approximately in addition. So
excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Is X the number of successes in the sample?
Yeah. Number of successes in this. Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So X, if I know P exactly, this is well. Okay. So maybe I should not say approximately at this point. Okay. So if I know P exactly, then this is exactly binomial NP. Then we know that X minus NP divided by, so the mean of a binomial NP random variable is NP and this variance is NP1 minus P. So if I take this quantity, this is now a standard normal approximately for large N. So we will always assume that N is large enough. Even 20, 30 is probably. Okay. So we want to determine a confidence interval for P. Right? P is the mean of a Bernoulli random variable. And a binomial is a sum of independent Bernoullis. So IID Bernoullis. So we want a confidence interval for P. So in contrast, so this is I should emphasize, so don't get confused. Warning here. X is not a sample mean. It's not a mean. It's a count. We are just counting the number of successes. Okay, so don't when you want to talk about confidence intervals for Bernoullis, we are not going to take sums. I mean, yeah, we're just going to count. Okay, so and if you want, that's also okay. Never mind. Yeah, so right. So as before, because we know things about. I mean, we know how to estimate. To get confidence intervals from normal random variables. As before, the probability of minus z alpha by 2 less than x minus np divided by square root of np 1 minus p less than z alpha by 2 is 1 minus alpha. Well, now I have to be careful. This is no longer equal to 1 minus alpha. So remember when we were talking about normal data, normally distributed data, this quantity in the middle involving the sample mean and involving the sample mean, the true mean and the true variance was truly normally distributed. But now this is no longer, so this is not exactly. But it's we will use this as a good enough approximation. Okay, is this point clear? Okay. So we will, as I said, we will assume n is less. So what we would like to say, so we would like to use this to get a confidence interval. So we would like to say that the confidence interval is the set of P such that minus z alpha by 2 less than x minus np. This x is from data, square root of np minus p is less than z alpha by 2. Where x is from, small x is from data. Okay. I mean, that's what one would like to say. So I have a question for you. Why can't we do this? We want a confidence interval for P. What is the problem? Why can't we see this? Anybody?
So because if we because p is in the denominator as well as the numerator, so if we will have to separate out the p, if we square it, then that would be just that we would just get a one-sided inequality that it would be less than z alpha
No,
beta.
there are inequalities on both sides. No, you are close to the right answer, but not quite. Anybody else? So Soham is kind of on the right track because, if the square root were not there, that would not be an issue. The square root complicates things because answer, this is not an interval in general. Remember, we are talking about confidence intervals. I want to say that P lies in this range. If it's a union of intervals or something, then it's not such a practical thing to handle. Right? So how do we get out of this? Yes.
So can you please repeat this? Like,
Sure. So look at this. This is an. So let's say we want to solve this inequality for P, right? So then you'll have to do some squaring, solve some, and there's a P squared inside. You have to solve some quadratic equation, get something out of it, and then you have to do the same for this side, and you're not going to get interval. The whole thing is not going to be one single interval. Okay.
so that could be an open interval, right?
Sorry?
So that could be an open interval, right?
I mean, we are always talking about open intervals. Now the problem is that this is not going to be a single interval. It could potentially be a union of intervals.
Yes, sir. No, what I was saying is that it would be an interval from minus infinity to some constant.
P is a probability. It's from 0 to 1.
Yes, so I see.
No, this is I mean, you want some P within some interval within 0, 1, a single interval. This is not the case. Okay. So how do you do it? So how do you get out of this? So I recall that we have done this computation that P hat, which is x by n, is the maximum likelihood estimator for P. Okay. So we expect P hat to be close to P because n is large. So, I mean, we are designing confidence interval, right? So, I mean, these are not. I mean, one has to make do with what one has. So, this is always the problem in statistics. We cannot live in an ideal. We do not live in an ideal world, so we have to adjust our expectations accordingly. No pun intended. So we will approximate square root of np 1 minus p by square root of np hat 1 minus p. Okay, this is what we will do. I mean, of course, it's one could approximate away everything, but then you get a 0 because I mean I cannot approximate this p hat, this p by p hat, because it will be 0. In any case, we want to estimate p, so I need some p. You might say, well, why did you take this? Why did you approximate this p1 minus p by p hat 1 minus p hat and not this and so on? But I mean, as I said, you cannot approximate this p by p hat and you'll get 0. So, I mean, but this seems like a sort of reasonable way out. So, in any case, as I said, this is approximate. This is an approximate thing. So, I mean, one is approximating a little more. So, the probability of minus z alpha by 2 less than x minus np divided by square root of p np hat 1 minus p hat less than z alpha by 2 is 1 minus approximately 1 minus alpha. Okay. So, you know, again doing the same trick, taking this guy on both sides and then adding x and so on, we get by the same kind of thing we have done several times now, an approximate 100 1 minus alpha confidence interval for P is the following. So, x by n minus z alpha by 2 by n square root of np hat 1 minus p hat to x by n plus z alpha by 2 by n square root of np hat 1 minus p hat. And now let's write it completely in terms of p hat. X by n is just p hat. So I have p hat minus z alpha by 2. 1 square root of n cancels. So I get p hat square root of p hat 1 minus p hat by n to p hat plus z alpha by 2 square root of p hat 1 minus p hat. Now this depends only on p hat and n and alpha, which it should. Okay. So this is how one constructs such an interval.
Sir?
Yes?
Is the fact that this form is very similar to the confidence interval for a normal random variable because of the approximation that we made that this would be approximately a normal random variable?
Yes, exactly. That's right. Yeah. So in general, one uses the normal distribution parameters to the fullest. Okay, and similarly, one can construct. Oh, that I should have said. Two-sided. One can construct one-sided confidence intervals. And remember, p is between 0 and 1, so don't go from minus infinity. So here is a nice application of this. I mean, with surprisingly little amount of information, you can glean a lot of. I mean, you can get a lot of surprise. Yeah, you can glean a lot of information. Okay, so a pole, say, indicated that 52% of the population in a state was in favor of the chief minister with a margin of plus minus 4%. Okay, so I'm not telling you which state and which chief minister and which era. So I'm not biasing you with my political opinions. Okay, so even you can think of whatever you You can choose whichever state, whichever scene, whichever time frame that you like. Okay, so question is, how many were sampled? So all that you are given is that 52% were in favor and the margin of error was 4%. So actually it's not even conclusive one way or the other, because it will go from 48 to 57. Okay, so how do you, I mean, how do you get anything out of this? So anybody has any idea of the starting point of the calculation?
So p hat is 0.52 and the variance is 0.04.
No, not, yeah, p hat is 0.52, variance is not 0.04. No, how can, I mean, variance of what?
Sorry, sir, I think it's like the 95% confidence interval for this.
Very good. Yes, that's right. So you see, the plus minus 4% refers to the fact that this quantity is the same as this quantity, and you have 52 plus minus 4%. So 52 minus 4 to 52 plus 4%. So and as Soham rightly points out, it is standard to take 95% confidence intervals in these polls. Typically what they announce is confidence intervals of 95%. So therefore we use Z of 0.025, which we know is 1.96. So we will take that, and again, as Soham said, also p hat is 0.52. Right? I mean, that's the center of this interval. And so what do we have? We have that this quantity is 0.04. So therefore Z alpha by 2, which is 1.96, square root of p hat 1 minus p hat, which is 0.52 times 0.48 divided by n, is approximately 0.04. Right? And so if I square and take n on the other side, so n is approximately 1.96 whole squared, 0.52, 0.48 divided by 0.04 whole squared, which is approximately 599.3. So approximately 600 people were sampled. So 599 people were sampled. Right? So, I mean, this is one takeaway from this course, if you like, that whenever you see info polls like this, you can see if the sample, for example, is large enough. I mean, if you had gotten 50 or something, or 20 in this from this calculation, you know that maybe this poll is not trustworthy. Typically, people, I mean, not typically, but sometimes people do not disclose how many were sampled. Okay, so I mean, this is a quick way to check. Okay, so let me tell you another application of this. So often we fix alpha, let's say like confidence interval 95% is standard, and we want the interval to be no larger than a given quantity B. And we want to determine N. So the company that conducts this sample will say, okay, we don't want a very large error. We want to say our error should be at most, let's say 1%. And we also want to have 95% confidence. So how large should you take? How much? How many people should we sample? I mean, we clearly don't want to sample too much. But how much is good enough? So this is a bit problematic because, so from our formula, above, I want the, okay, I want to say width of the interval. The width is, if you see here, it's twice this quantity, right? So it's twice z alpha by 2 square root of p hat 1 minus p hat by n, which is approximately twice z alpha by 2 square root of p1 minus p by n. Okay? Now what is the problem here? The problem is that we don't know p. Well, you don't know p hat either. You might say, oh, well, but we know p hat. You know, you don't know p hat because this sampling company has not yet conducted the survey. They want to know n. They just want to know, they only have alpha and they want this width to be no longer than b. So they have this is equal to b roughly. Okay, but we don't know p, and you want both p and n are unknown. So what do you do? Okay, this is again, you know, a real life problem. What do you do? So here a trick, or the trick here is to take what is called a preliminary sample. So if you, I mean, from experience, these companies know how much to sample. Maybe like in our example above, they had about 600 people, but maybe they say, okay, let's just do, I mean, we are pretty sure that the number will be in the 100. So let's maybe take 100 people and get some preliminary estimate. Get a rough estimate, again using the mean, the sample mean, P star for P. Okay, so they get some preliminary estimate. Okay, this is, they won't take this into account in the later in the calculation, but they initially, just to determine n, they will use this P star. So then we solve the equation twice z alpha by 2 square root of p star 1 minus p star by n equal to b, and so we get n equals 4 z alpha by 2 squared p star 1 minus p star divided by b squared. Right? So this gives you some numerical value to sample. Okay. So if k were initially sampled, we need to sample an extra n minus k. Right? So, I mean, you can include the preliminary sample in this. I mean, that's not wasted data because we are assuming IID, right? So that sample you should not throw away. I mean, that's still the p hat that you will get will refine this p star. Okay. Okay. Another remark in this about this is that if you look at the function p1 minus p, the function, you must have seen this in high school many times, looks like the following: 0, 1. It's a parabola, and it takes maximum value 1/4 at half. So if you look at this guy, the maximum for n is attained when this is when p star is half and n is always less than or equal to. So this will give you a 1/4, that will cancel the 4, and so you will get a fairly simple formula: z alpha by 2 whole squared by b squared. Okay, and so coming back to the original question, which is this: you have b, you have alpha and b, and you want to determine n. You can, if cost is not such a big issue, you can take so many samples. You don't need so. I mean, you don't need to do more calculations if you're okay with a larger sample set. So if we choose z alpha by 2 whole squared by b squared samples, we can be sure of getting an interval, reasonably sure, because of all the approximations we made, getting an interval of length at most b. Okay, that's the point. Okay, is this clear? Okay, right. So good. So as I said, this is the last confidence interval I will discuss. So I'm now going to move on to the next chapter on hypothesis testing. So if there are any questions about any of this, please ask. Okay. If there are no questions, let's move on. Yes? Yeah. Okay. So we're moving on to the next chapter, chapter 8 on hypothesis testing. Okay. So let me set up the framework. So a statistical hypothesis is a statement about the set of parameters of a population distribution. So remember that we always have an underlying distribution from which we are going to get our samples, and this distribution is going to have parameters, and the hypothesis is a statement about the parameters. So for example, if you are sampling from exponential lambda distribution, you can say a hypothesis would be that lambda equal to 1, for example. So example, exponential lambda and lambda equal to 1 would be a hypothesis. Okay. So the hypothesis is that lambda equal to 1. Okay, this is one hypothesis. I mean, this is by no means just one. I mean, you could take lambda greater than equal to 10. You know, you could have many such hypotheses. Any statement like of that form is a hypothesis. That's all. Okay. And now, so the problem here is to design a procedure to determine if the hypothesis seems correct. Okay, and I should warn you that we cannot say with absolute certainty if the hypothesis is true or not. This we cannot do because we only have finite amount of data, and from that we can only say if our observations are consistent with it or not. So just to give you an example from the beginning of the course, so you have a coin and your hypothesis you could say is that the coin is fair. This is our hypothesis. Which means, which is equivalent to saying Bernoulli P with P equal to half, and this is the hypothesis, right? And this is a question I asked you at the beginning of the course. How do you determine if a coin is fair? I give you a regular, or you take a regular coin from your wallet or purse, whatever, and you toss it, right? What else can you do with a coin? So suppose we toss it 100 times. So there are I give you two scenarios. If 53 are heads, then this seems true. The hypothesis seems true. And if maybe there are 75 heads, then I would say that the hypothesis seems false. Certainly, if there are 99 heads, then it's absolutely no. I mean, any reasonable person would say that it's probably not. Okay, but we cannot guarantee, because what if the next 100 tosses, balance it out? and this has a finite probability, and it's a small probability, but it's still finite. So what do you do, right? So that's the question. Okay, so another example. So this is one. I'll give you another example. Suppose we have samples from a normal distribution with mean mu and variance 1. So you know the variance. So we have, let's say, our hypothesis is that mu is negative. It is certainly a possible hypothesis. So if 10 samples have a mean 0.25, then it could still be true. I mean, this. Right? I mean, 0.25 is not that far away from 0, because variance is 1, remember. And if these 10 samples have mean, let's say 2.1, then it is, I would say, likely to be false. Okay, so I hope the point is clear. I mean, you want to, all this is sort of qualitative. We want to have a precise quantitative procedure. So, I mean, you don't want to leave things to personal opinion, because we have biases and so on. So we want a precise procedure which will decide for us whether a certain hypothesis is true or not. Okay. So let me just set the framework for this, and I will stop. Okay. So let f theta be the distribution where theta is a set of unknown parameters. So, and we want to test a specific hypothesis about theta. Okay. This specific, the hypothesis we are testing is, there's a name for it. This is called the null hypothesis. Is denoted capital H0. And this is the standard terminology. Okay, so we will see. So, for example, f theta could be n theta 1. Okay, and two possible null hypotheses are, first one we could say theta is 0, and the second one we could say theta is less than or equal to 0. Right? I mean, in the first case we are saying that theta is precisely some given number, and in the second case we are saying, okay, I mean, this is, we are allowing ourselves that it's probably non-positive. Okay, so in the first case, if this were true, so I should have said H0. So typically one writes like this, H0 colon whatever the hypothesis. Okay. If true in the first case, the distribution is a standard normal, which is a fully determined distribution. Now there is no parameters which determines the distribution completely. There are no more parameters, and here H0 is called a simple hypothesis. Okay. And in the B case, if true, the distribution is whatever n theta 1 with theta less than or equal to 0. I mean, this is not a fully determined distribution. I mean, because you don't know theta. I mean, we say that theta is less than or equal to 0, but this is a large interval. This is here, which does not specify the distribution completely. And here H0 is in this B case is called a compound hypothesis. I mean, because you have to do more to determine the distribution.
Sir,
yes.
So is the null hypothesis simple if and only if it determines the distribution completely? Like
Yes.
suppose both theta and both the mean and variance were not known.
Yes.
And then suppose there was a hypothesis like theta is equal to 0 and sigma is equal to something else. Then would that be called a simple hypothesis?
Right. So the distribution should be determined completely, no matter how many parameters there are. Yes. So
Okay, sir.
so only then you get a simple hypothesis. Anything which only partially determines is called a compound. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I have been sort of leaving you guys late for the last so many classes, so maybe this is a good time to stop. So next time I will describe how to decide whether to accept or reject a given hypothesis. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Those who didn't attend missed out this early departure. Okay. All right. See you guys next week.
Thank you, sir.